Yeah, no. I've meant to spell this in ages. But I should do because I know I love people to spell my name.
Well, I mean, I shouldn't establish something for future corporation. Concession.
No.
It's quite funny because I've got quite a simple name with it being wrong.
Yeah. But you still get it wrong.
Hi, Steve.
That's
That's a lovely shirt.
I think you should just,
A bit like Martin's.
Yeah.
You two buy shirts
They
together.
would get that right. It's such a unique name, isn't it?
but you should.
How are you? You alright?
It's so ridiculous.
Yeah,
How
good.
many the union weather is
Oh, right.
Goes upstairs. No, I've had Tim's not making it. Do you have Kim's in?
Kim is off today.
Should we crack on?
Oh, this is a small bit, isn't it?
I've got a big room.
Well, it's Easter break.
What's happening?
Easter break and Dom, Hillary and James. will make it small as well.
Is he Dom?
Yeah, so not having Dom, Hillary and
Oh,
James.
sorry.
Cool. Let's crack on. Welcome to our Spring 29 show and tell. Thanks all for coming. We're going to run through quite a few small updates today, including a small one from Leeds that Matt's going to do. Dan, Henrik and Matt, and our guest Rob. Welcome.
Hi, Rob.
Hello.
Hi, Rob.
So we had two main sprint goals. One was prepare for the Symptoms Hack Day that went on yesterday. I hope it was a success. Feedback coming in slowly or quickly or
The feedback, yeah, we've got feedback.
awesome. And cover topics and start on one class dog. We didn't quite start on, but we have cover topics hopefully, which Henrik will tell us about later. That's how the board finished. I added a new graphic this week, the shared on Slack, and no one wants anything, so we'll talk about it now. I'm never quite sure how geeky you want me to be in terms of our data, of how fast we're going. If anyone's never seen one of these before, they've got a community flow diagram. It's like a burn down chart for Kanban walls. So basically, you start here, we had 35 items. We started with the start of our sprint, and this was our smaller and smaller, our backlog. We were left with about 2 or 3 items left in the backlog at the end of the sprint. Okay, all this is our done, growing, nice and big. So we got through an awful lot of work, basically. That's what it summarises that as. 31 tasks, something like that. So we really had a longer sprint, we got through an awful lot. There was no more about that afterwards. Come and talk to me. One blog went up, Hillary's blog went up. It's a really good one. If you haven't read it, have a look and do please share it around. And we've got another one going live today, potentially from Kim. Even though she's not on, she was thinking of putting it live today, so we'll see. I'll now get my best Hillary impression for digital engagement analysis from March. 18% decrease in blog users since February, 2% increase in page views, lots of popular blogs. I mean, the summary overall, we know how important blogging is, and we continue to do it probably better than any team we know of. Certainly the quality and regularity of our blogs are really strong. I think we're very proud of that. And I think that Alice is won one week. There's no gold stars on these, so I can't tell who won each week. But it is worth being involved. Those are all the ones we had. I know that Hillary tracks the NHS Alpha hashtag. One of the things she was talking about before she went was what we're going to do with moving to beta. Are we going to change our hashtag or not? Some serious first world issues there. Or are we actually going to have an account? We're still not really sure how that's all going to look. So ideas welcome, please submit them in. And as you've seen from if you haven't seen our area upstairs, come have a look. On the wall we have some of these printed out. Some of the leading lights across government are talking about our blog and saying how much they enjoy reading it, how wonderful it is. And those kind of feedback comments make it more and more valuable for us to keep doing it. Because everyone else is listening and watching. And yeah, an easy winner there for the month from Alice. Congratulations, Alice. Despite being off for the whole of the month, you have managed to win. which is frustrating for all concerned, if I'm honest. And lots of comments. We do have a policy of responding to the majority of the comments that come to our blog. The only one thing that we don't respond to are ones that kind of just unnecessarily abusive. Basically, someone's just having an absolute rant without any sort of grounding in what we're doing. We normally invite them to come to the show and talk about it instead of responding via comments. We don't have a huge comment chain in terms of the Twitter war that you can see occasionally. And at the moment, as I say, we're still alpha, so direct messages to this box still come in. We get a lot of people emailing us, asking to come to our shows and so asking to learn more. Of course, we always say yes, so if you do know anyone wants to come and present to a guest slot, invite them along. I'll be happy to do. Fantastic. Dan, up to you.
Dante.
Dante.
I wanted to share my pain. So, what has Dan been up to? When Dan's really sad at the desk. Well, Dan's been up to doing process. So I guarantee this presentation will contain no user needs. It will contain no actual delivery, no software or anything like that. It's just pure process. So, for those who aren't familiar, these are Dante's 9 circles of hell, including gluttony, greed, anger, heresy and violence. I've experienced all of these over the past few weeks when trying to navigate through these 9 circles of NHS.UK alpha hell. If you want to see the health and care system version, it looks a bit like this. This is a simplified version of the approvals process for projects that want to spend money on healthcare IT stuff. I've radically simplified that for today's purposes. So the first circle of hell, you may have heard the phrase IPMB a few weeks ago. So back in February, we went to IPMB to get their endorsement, because they don't approve things, they just endorse things apparently. But you have to go to this learned set of people, present what we've been doing in a cogent way, and then they endorse you to go to the next phase, except they're not always that clear about what actually gets agreed at the meeting. So just a tip for everybody, the notes, the minutes of the meeting are really important, and sometimes they don't always reflect what actually got said in the meeting, so watch out for that one. This is what ended up in the minutes of the meeting. They agreed with our direction of travel, but the actual approval could not be given without further information and assurance. Didn't actually tell us what further information was required or what further assurance was required. The next few weeks was all about finding out what exactly that meant. And it was also about doing a set of planning. So we got some ideas about what we want to do. We've spent time actually, doing research and building prototypes and so on to figure out what are the things we need to do. What then followed was a series of turning that into a deliverable plan. So I ended up constructing, with everybody's help, some of these things, which are just kind of like simple descriptions of the priorities that we've got, I suppose. So this is the one for paperless GP registration. So that's phase 1, is write a bit of a plan to show to people. It's it's solid. It's it's good practice. If you're gonna spend money, you've got to say what you're gonna do with that money. I agree with that. The next phase was about putting some numbers to that. So the next circle of hell was about me tormenting Prakash by changing our mind every day pretty much on what our overall budget was and what the priorities were and what the projects were within the project. So this figure changed quite a bit, but we had to do a whole series of spreadsheets behind this thing and then balance the books to make sure we're only spending the money that we've actually got. But do we actually have that money? That's an interesting question. So the next circle of hell is financial approval. So the endorsement wasn't approval. We needed to get actual approval for the budget, the nominal budget that's been floated for the project. So in order to do that, I had to produce a series of documents. So on the shared drive, it's open to everybody in the project. You can have a look at this folder. It's called like NHS.UK finance request or something like that. 9 documents, beautiful documents that I've laboured over to explain to everybody why we want this money and why we need this money to progress and deliver the things that we say we're going to deliver. Wasn't entirely clear where we needed to send this, who had the responsibility for approving this thing. So you can't, in this situation, you kind of just got to state what you're going to do and then wait for anybody to object to it. I've learned this skill from Alice, who's nodding furiously at the back there, eating her breakfast. So we did that, we produced it, sent it to people, didn't get any major objections, so I'm assuming that's approved. As good as it gets. Right, then but hey, that was too simple, wasn't it? Because while we were kind of trying to speed along and trying to actually deliver something, this thing called the National Information Board decided to do something which it called prioritisation. Which is about, right, we've got loads of projects. We're just one project of many, many projects across the system, and people want to do even more projects. So the great and the good got together to do this prioritisation session, which was about 4 days of hellish workshops, where very little was decided. And it was essentially, how do we spend the money? How do we spend all this money that we've got and deliver on all these commitments that have been made by various people? And it ended up producing spreadsheets like this. So this is the list of 24 new projects that have been floated. We are one of them. We are number 20. The figure here is getting towards $1 billion. This is just the revenue. When you add the capital, you're talking about 4.2 billion. I think that was the figure that was announced of money that is going to be spent across this parliament, all these kind of projects. So this is look, don't get me wrong, this is very, very difficult and challenging stuff. However, from our perspective, from NHS.UK, this slowed us down because the finance people were unwilling to give us the go-ahead on our very, very small amount of money that we wanted to just get started until this £4.2 billion budget was carved up amongst these 25 projects. So those workshops made the process very unclear, made the money that was available to us very, very unclear. And it's still quite unclear to me what the outcomes of this thing was. But assuming we got the money, and because no one's raised any major objections, I am assuming we got the money. The next phase is actually to spend the money. So we've got contractors. We need to continue using contractors because the recruitment processes are so, messed up in this place. That's not one of the 9 circles of hell. That's for another presentation. But because we want to use contractors, you've got to do something called a PSBC that needs to go to FAB. Does anyone know what that means? It means you need to do a professional services business case to articulate why you need contractors and how you try to get permanent people in and how you're spending the money on contractors. And for quite good reason. Because government in the past has spent lots of money on lots of consultancy for not very much value. However, we're not getting in hordes of consultants. We're not just opening a door and saying, McKinsey, come in, PwC, come in. No, we need specialist skills to deliver a digital project. But because of that, we need to go through the PSBC process, which goes to the Financial Approvals Panel, which is FAB. And this basically involves sending a lot of emails, chasing people. 85 emails on this one thread. That's just one of many threads of, hi, do you have any update on the approval that was meant to happen yesterday? And then you just get radio silence and ambiguity. That's what you get. And then you get told that, oh, you think you've gone through all the steps you need to? Oh no, there's this other step that we forgot to tell you about that you now have to go up to Mr. Bloggs, who has to provide his endorsement. Spend approval. So you've got the investment approval, so you've got the finances agreed within the departments, but you also need to ensure that you're spending the money in the right way when it comes to a digital project. Now we have spending controls, digital spend controls. I, for my sins, spent a year in GDS running this process on spend controls for Department of Health. I believe in it passionately. I believe it's saved government billions of pounds and it's helped us do the right thing. However, when the guy in GDS who was meant to be taking control of the case and responding to me, I just get a bounce back saying I'm not in the office until the 4th of April on the 23rd of March and he's not told me, and there's only 28 days in which this is meant to be done, then I think, what's going on? And I'm an insider in this process. I used to work in that team. What is it like for people who don't have a clue about this system and like are struggling to navigate through it? So that was the 7th. The 8th was is procurement. Procurement is a nightmare. We all know procurement's a nightmare, but we buy some managed services for this project. So the reason why Peter and Prakash, our business case team, haven't been around is because we've been caught up in the procurement bullshit of 3 organisations and different people saying different things and just going in a never-ending loop of process and policy. So I'm hoping that will be unblocked soon, but that's been another nightmare. And the final one is governance. So we've got a project review group, which some of us have the pleasure of going to every 2 weeks. But it's fair to say that the governance for this project does not follow the best practice set out in the service design manual on governance principles for agile service delivery. Things like don't slow down delivery, decisions when they're needed at the right level, only do it if it adds value. If you've never read this, really good. I think Benji stuck it up on the wall upstairs as well, but have a read of that. That's really, really good stuff. Like, I wish everybody involved in governing projects in this environment would have a read of that. But I've got 2 simple principles that are kind of similar to that, but I think everyone should heed. If you can plead with everybody outside to do and follow this, just make a decision. That's all I'm asking. That's number 1 is, I wish someone somewhere would just make a decision. Like, there's so many people involved in this process, very few of them actually make decisions. And I don't blame the people, because they probably don't feel empowered to make those decisions. But actually, like, we could just cut a lot of the crap if people just actually stood by, you know, looked at the evidence and made a decision, rather than just kicking things into the long grass. And when decisions get made, stick with them. Please don't change them 2 weeks later. It really annoys me. And the second one is, tell us what we're aiming at. So this process is pretty much blind. And again, I'm an insider. I know this process, or I think I do, is better than most people. But it's still completely opaque. You don't know who you need to speak to, what process you need to follow, what their expectations are, how they'll assess the information that you give them. And it just seems like once you go through this process, the goalposts change and you think, oh, I didn't realise I needed to do that as well. So it'd be really nice if this stuff was, you know, clearer and simpler. That's it. That's my rant over. Thank you for listening.
Right. Meanwhile, in heaven on the 7th floor, without any money, going ahead to do some prioritization of what we're looking at and want to work on for the next 6 months for transition. And the aim was to get some topics, get some conditions linked to those topics. So we started with a pool of things we looked at from the top 200 pages on NHS choices. We then culled that list because there was duplication, there was things we'd already looked at, there was things that were too big to do in 6 months, like terminal cancers. So we took those out. We then ran a workshop where we had all these conditions, symptoms, procedures to look at. and we clustered them into groups in terms of what kind of topics do these conditions and symptoms and so on sit under. And of course, medicine isn't black and white, it's very much 250 shades of grey. So a lot of these things flowed through a lot of topics, but we use them to cluster them into groups as sort of example topics, example conditions, if that makes sense. We then stepped away from it and compared the topics and the conditions we had to search data, so wider than just choices. What do people search for on the net in terms of health and medical conditions? And unsurprisingly, the lists matched pretty much because choices is one of the big points people go to. We then went ahead to choose some of the topics, and these are the ones we want to look at. One of procedures, so hospital procedure, someone has a problem, they get diagnosed, they go and see a doctor, then we are being sent to a hospital and they have to have a procedure. This is something we haven't looked at in the alpha at all, so we need to fill that gap. The next one is compliance, which sounds a bit official, but it's about people being given meds or treatment and not following up with it and getting into problems, costing the NHS money. Also the other way around, the NHS procedures are being so complicated that people find it hard to comply with what they've been told to do. The next one is social care, which is a big topic that we haven't looked at and is especially important for long-term conditions. And another one we haven't looked at was prevention. Again, it's a big area. So these two, social care and prevention, we have to find focus for in terms of what we want to look at, because in 6 months we can't do everything. So we choose some conditions. Some are exclusive to one topic and some will float across the topic, so across prevention and compliance and possibly a procedure. Here's some examples that we chose. Osteoarthritis, hernia, these would be one of procedures. Back pain, physio is about compliance, and eczema as well. High blood pressure, diabetes is about prevention. So what we want to do is not just look at the information for these things, also at the services. So it's a whole picture kind of approach. We now need to do some more desk research about these things, look at the practicalities of how much can we achieve in 6 months. And then we will prioritize the topics. Which one are we going to start with? Is it going to be prevention or one of procedure? And then we will, under each topic, prioritize the conditions we want to look at. The approach is the same as we did in the alpha. We will start with the user needs. We will find patterns, design, content, and so on. And the whole point of this is that in the next 6 months, we want to lay the groundwork for transition so that we then, in October, can go off and approach new topics in a much quicker way because we know what we're doing. Thanks.
So I'm doing a quick update from Joe, which is handy because some people confuse us, so I'll get away with it. Basically, in Leeds, they've been working on some of the entity mapping and personas that they did from the early rounds of research where they went out and looked at long-term conditions. Lots of the stuff they did in homes with people. Basically, Joe said these are available to share. If people want to have a look at them, we can get them on the shared drive and talk to them if we want to know more. Most recently, Leeds have been sort of taking a similar approach to what Henrik has with Henrik and Kim have with the sort of the information, and been looking at the services which are most searched for and most used across choices at the moment. So they looked at the search data, and they came up with sort of the big sort of services were the NHS Choices entry pages for, some of the data was the NHS Choices entry pages, existing digital service transactions, transaction volumes, customer satisfaction surveys, and existing sort of user needs that they had. So lots of the things that came up were sort of services that you might expect, like EHIC, but also people on pages such as like the GP overview pages. And the surveys was telling us that there were people there to do transactions, which is probably not surprising for lots of us. But it's a page telling you about a practice. The survey asked why you're here, and it was like to register, to book, to make a complaint, to cancel. There was only a few people who were there, like to find out opening times or to read about the practice. So it really puts into sort of our minds what's the point of the pages and why we're doing those. That one's really interesting as well, because obviously Leeds have had a look, and we know that Choices are also interested in revamping those pages somewhat. And obviously we're interested in those pages for register with the GP, because a lot of that information should probably be in a service if that's what people are looking to do, not just the static content on the pages. So there's been quite a few things that have come up through the services that they've found, as I said, including things like EHIC, hospital appointments, sort of other big transactional stuff. Blood tests was quite interesting as well. Lots of people said they were looking for blood tests, so again, that's some of the stuff that we've discovered. I had a chat with Joe yesterday, and we're just going to continue to catch up to see how this fits in with what Himric's working on, what we're working on with Register with the GP. But again, there's probably some really interesting stuff to discover around some of the underpinning data for a lot of this stuff. So again, people looking for opening times, what's the reliable source of that? Do we know where that information is coming from? That's going to sort of run through everything from information and services to the transactions to the information pages. So Leeds are continuing to work on that, and they will keep us updated. And also just sharing a picture from, is that card upside down? It is upside down. Just showing a picture of a visit from Roy Lilly, who came into HSCIC. They showed him some information and some of the stuff that we've been working on together, the Alpha.NHS.UK prototypes. It was really positive. He wrote quite a nice blog about the things that happened, shared it on Twitter, and is also following our blog. So yeah, it was a good week, and that's it.
No, that's right. Well, good morning, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Matt. I'm one of the designers on the project. Interim tech lead on the project. And I'm now just about to fumble with some text. So I'm going to show you something we've been working on, and it's to do with the ongoing saga of font choice for NHS.UK. So, so basically, really quick catch up. Like we're basically looking at a couple of different fonts, making decisions based on like existing brand, updating the brand, whether or not that's a possibility, cost, but also probably most importantly, legibility, readability, and usability. And we've done some desk research on it, and I've written a blog post about it, and there's a lot of research out there, and there's a lot of kind of traditional opinion out there. And there's some things we thought we could use to do some tests. We could actually take out to research and just start to get some statistical data on, to help us make these kind of choices. So what I'm going to do is boil rigid with a glance test. And I'll just go through it and then I'll basically try and, it should be relatively self-explanatory, but I've got to get my game on. So what you may or may not be noticing is this is starting to get faster. I'm starting to forget what words mean. last one. Okay, so obviously the spectator sport. Basically, this is based on a test that Massachusetts Institute of Technology and Monotype were running to do with glance testing. Their particular situation was things like sat-navs and in-car kind of navigational tools. What they were doing was testing Eurostar, which is quite a sort of 80s, techno-looking font, which wasn't has been kind of common in those kind of interfaces, with something a bit more traditionally legible, like Frutiger. What I just did then was test Frutiger versus something called FSB, which is a font specifically designed for legibility. And I think this might be quite interesting because what we're actually doing is testing two fonts with each other that are supposedly both extremely legible, one of which is the brown font, one of which is traditionally very, very legible, one of which is a font specifically designed for legibility. And what that test gives you, which I'll see today, basically what that test will record is some numbers. So basically, like whether or not you got it right, the duration. What the duration does is basically start off quite slow with a second to see the word, and basically the speed, the duration will basically step down until it's really quite quick. But when you get it wrong, it'll step back up again. So in theory, over a bit of time, you'll hit a kind of medium right and wrong, where your times will start to even out. So
Can you explain what to get it right and wrong is?
yes. So some of the words that you're seeing are real words. Some of them are pseudo words, so they resemble real words in a way, but they're actually just gobbledygook. They're not real words. So what was being flashed in front of me was either a real word or a pseudo word. And I was basically going, yes, that's a real word, or no, that's not a real word.
But what's an example of a pseudo word?
Around. So there's one, like, it looks like a round, but it's not. So in theory, at high speed, if the font is quite legible, you should be able to spot that quite quickly. If it's less legible, you might have more difficulty spotting it, or there might be a higher occurrence of mistakes for that word. What else are we measuring? We're also measuring like my actual response time. So the time it took me from when it asked me to the time it took me to hit the right key. So basically we're just gathering some bits and bobs of data that we can then dig into a bit. So at the moment I did 10 of each. The MIT test did 100 of each. So I would have been sat there for about half an hour doing that. But you start, at the moment, what my test results, essentially in the duration bit, are doing, they're just going like, because I'm basically getting everything right. But eventually, over like the course of about 100 or so, they will start to I'll start to get them wrong at a certain speed because it will be too fast for me to look at it. So then the line will start to even out into something that we think will give us a kind of medium duration. And in theory, there may be differences, or there may not, between our various font selections. But it's one way we can use to try and get some kind of idea about legibility. Obviously, legibility is very context-driven, so in terms of sitting in front of a book, this is less of a big deal. But in terms of like stumbling down a street looking at your mobile, it's a bit more relevant. But it's one of several tests that we can do. So that's where we've got to so far with that. I'm going to fiddle around with some monitors again. This is probably going to...
So you're not going to tell us which is winning?
No, I'm not going to tell you which is winning, because we don't know yet. Like, there's not enough data to say which is winning it. What the hell is that mean? Is this yours? Help me. Oh, nice. Okay, so, finish fumbling with laptops. Right, so things still to do on this. Basically, when you're doing about 400 rest breaks, optional rest breaks. So every 50 or so, what it should in theory do is just go to a rest break with a countdown and just go continue when you're ready, just so we can keep things standardised, or not harry people as it were. Make sure we can record 400 CSV rows, which sounds slightly prosaic, but I just want to make sure we can actually do that over a GET request. Because basically for every full test we'll do, we'll have 400 CSV rows. And then basically lay out the start and end pages properly so they're nice. At the moment, this is a person-to-person test. So basically, we would do this sat with someone rather than do it remotely. It's worth thinking about taking it to a bigger thing remotely, but there may be some specific things we need to watch out for with that. Otherwise, I think, Tim, you might be meeting with the MIT people or the monotype people, is that right? That did the original test?
Yeah, so I've been in contact with the people at Monotype who did the original test with people at MIT, and they're interested in what we're doing with regards to this. They had a few concerns about the web-based technology for it, which was fine in terms of it's about the specifics of the web refresh rate for a web browser being fast enough to refresh the interval time that we needed in order to display the characters fast enough. They just wouldn't be able to catch up. And we should be able to make sure that we align the research or the data we're doing with the specifics that they did, so we can at least have some sort of continuation of the research they've done. They only did it on 2 fonts, Eurostyle and one on Frutiger, but if we want to push this out as a web test and do lots of different fonts, we need to make it in line with some of their research findings, or their research methodology, not necessarily their findings. That's what we're wanting to replicate with this stuff.
Yeah, so that's the latest instalment in the font saga. And a small announcement. I don't know if anyone here is going to go or whatever, but April 2016, towards the end of the month, there's a cross-government design meeting. I think the theme is accessibility, so they've got Alistair Duggan, who did speak to us a while back, but also Leonie Watson and I think a couple of guests. If anyone's interested, it is totally open to anyone, preferably designers, but it's open to anyone in government. And I think it's something we should probably be getting involved with a bit in terms of attendance and getting into that community a bit. So just drop me an email or grab me if you're at all interested in turning into that. Thanks.
Fantastic. Up last, we have our guest speaker. I'm sure he's going to tell you much more about own book. Should swap over nicely, hopefully. One's a one technology. Strong start.
That's it. You'll go home now. Cool, so I am also a designer. This is me, I'm Rob. I work as a UI, UX designer and been doing so over the past 8 years, and last year I was with Trainline and all that kind of stuff. But kind of what got me here today was 4 years ago I had a big operation on my heart, and from having that operation, all this stuff I talk through is from a patient perspective. But from having that operation, it kind of built its own kind of frustrations as well as having the operation with ongoing medical care and all the rest of it. So the medication I take is warfarin. I'm sure you've all heard of it, and I'm on it lifelong. And I'm expected to carry around this little yellow book with all my dosages, all my kind of readings that I take for my blood, and so on. So I mean, even with just taking blood tests, that's got its own kind of problems with it. So I'm kind of expected to go to a clinic once a month, once a week, and take a blood test, stand in line, and it takes a lot kind of out of my day. So there's self-testing things that you can get, so like that, that's really convenient. and helps me a lot with that. But I guess the main thing from this is there's a lot to take in. When I had this operation, so my dosages change every day, keeping in touch with my clinic, knowing taking my readings, they're quite irregular, so they can be take a blood test in 3 days from kind of level. It could be take a blood test next week, take it in 3 months' time. So it's keeping all these things together. So that was the main thing that I kind of struggled with, and then also kind of adhering to taking the medication. So taking it every day. There's certain things you need to avoid in terms of diet, drinking, and all that kind of stuff. And they all kind of play into it. So from my recuperation, I was out for like 3 months. So I started kind of working on it, and it was kind of purely built out of my own kind of frustrations with what was out there and kind of what was going on with it. So I mean, as I'm sure you guys kind of work and all the rest of it. So get some ideas down. I originally was just going to build it just as something for me to use, but after kind of talking to people, I had a little kind of Facebook group that I was sharing this kind of stuff with that are all in similar conditions. And like from talking to doctors, a lot of them say, well, you know, you're quite rare to be at this age and having this kind of thing. And they say most people are like over 60s and stuff. But talking to my kind of Facebook group, it's like there's tons of people out there that are exactly like me, in the UK, all over the world, and they've all got a similar problem. So then I started working it up into an actual app of this kind of diary where you can keep on top of what's going on. It tells you, I mean, it's a really kind of lightweight, simple app, and that was the main kind of purpose of it. I didn't want it to feel heavy. It's aimed at patients, it's not aimed at medical professionals. All the other apps out there that are doing similar stuff are all for medical professionals, and they all use language that's off-putting for patients. So that was the main focus. So you get a kind of stating the obvious, obviously a calendar thing where you can say what dosages you're taking, as well as have some kind of track of all your readings. And the kind of main goal of this is it's something you can carry around. You can share it with your clinic, you can share it with your family or whoever else. But it's there to kind of replace that kind of that yellow book. So I launched it 2-3 years ago. It's been really well received. I mean, it's a very niche audience, so I don't get thousands of downloads, but I mean, I get a download like every other day, so it's kind of enough just to kind of keep me doing it. And I think the feedback that I get in the App Store and the emails I get from it are kind of quite rewarding. So from doing that, I've kind of been a few different places. I got featured in Telegraph. Guy from Northumbria University featured it in this book, The Principles of Design Interaction, and picked up a few awards and stuff. And I guess the next step for it at the moment is kind of taking it to the clinics, getting if all these patients are using it, the data's just kind of going into this one thing, and it's not really kind of getting the benefit of what it could do. If clinics were using it, they can log on, they can see everything that's going in there, they can report back, and it becomes this kind of little kind of central hub for people doing it like that. So that's kind of where I'm at with it at the moment. I've had a clinic that's been interested in kind of trialling it up in County Durham, so I'm kind of in kind of conversations with them, and rolling it out onto an Android thing. So that's it. That's the app in itself. I think there's still tons of things that I can develop into it, especially for my own personal frustrations. So things like when I take a reading, I have to bring it through to my clinic. I then have to tell my doctor to get a new prescription, and it's just kind of linking up all of those kind of things for me. At the moment, I'm kind of there's some stuff, and then I'm going to someone else. There's some other stuff, and it's kind of it falls down a bit there. So I think that's kind of ideally where I'd like to eventually take it, and that's it. Right.
Thanks, Rob. Start with questions. Anyone got any questions for Rob? He's still up here.
Yeah, what kind of clinic do you end up going to?
So at the moment I have to go to an anticoagulation clinic, so a warfarin clinic, and they normally do blood tests for everyone. So my clinic is in Whitechapel, Royal London, So I'm with them at the moment, although I'm based in Southwark, so it's not even the same district at the moment. And at the moment, I've got my own kind of things with moving from Hackney to Southwark, changing them over. My Southwark doctor won't prescribe my testing strips, so I'm kind of, I don't know what I'm going to do from there on. But yeah, there's loads of kind of things where like they're not all thinking the same, which is, I mean, then the patient has to go away, and for me to kind of make sense of it, it's like, why are they saying one thing? Why is the other person saying something else? Then you have to kind of Google it and find out for yourself.
Rob, it's awesome. Thanks for showing it to us. So we have a phrase around here to describe what you just said, which was the patient has to do the integration.
Yeah.
To understand the system. My question is, so just the reality is you're then taking this app to the various clinics and then just showing them the screen there, and then they're taking the numbers off that and acting on it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, do they put the numbers into any system, or do they just eyeball them and make a?
I don't know. I mean, when I go to so at the moment when I go to my clinic to give them a blood reading, I'll phone them up and say my blood reading was this, and then they have to come back to me with a dosage saying, okay, you're too high, you need to lower your dosage. So that's one way of me communicating. And then I go to the doctor to get my prescription for the warfarin, and they say, right, what was your last reading? Right, it was this. What are you taking? I'm taking this. Right, and then they deal with it. And then I have to go to the pharmacy to pick up my prescription. And they're like, right, what's your reading? What were you taking? It was this, blah, blah, blah. And it's just like constant back and forth. It's like if you all know this information, just talk to each other. And that saves me a lot of pain.
This is really interesting because it's exactly what we saw when we talked to people with diabetes, and they are all carrying around these big folders with all their appointments and their medication, and they're saying exactly the same thing. I have to tell the same thing to 20 different people in 5 different places. Why is that?
Yeah. It's probably the most similar to diabetes than anything else, and yeah, it's got the same kind of problems with it. But
have you spoke to the so there's 2 main software vendors in the anticoagulant space, Dawn, AC, and INR Star.
Yeah.
And have you spoke to those guys about
so the clinic up in County Durham is using Dawn.
Yeah.
And I was kind of talking with them of integrating with that. I mean, even that Dawn system sounds quite old school.
Not great,
They're ringing people up and they have to. It's like an automated thing. It's like your reading is blah blah. Take this. So I think it's still a lot of work for them to do. But that's kind of the talks at the moment, is bringing in this thing as another kind of point to put the information in and kind of get the information back.
Yeah, I agree with you. I wrote an anticoagulant system myself years ago for professionals, and it's still used today in the hospital because Dawn and INR Star is so bad. And I think the professionals are equally as frustrated by the lack of information, having to print things out and stick them in these yellow books. There were different colour books when I was and stuff, but and I've spoke to a lot of patients a bit like you, and it's so frustrating. And the wins and the gains are not that difficult if you just get things done right. Even the text messaging of dosage for elderly people had a massive impact. So I think this is superb. I think Dawn and INR Star should be ripping their hand off to get integrated with this.
When I spoke to other clinics, a lot of them are just kind of like, well, we've got our kind of systems and we kind of deal with them. They don't, because it's very much from a patient focus. They're like, well, we've got all these things that are a lot more kind of sophisticated than what that is, so we use them. So it's kind of, this is a patient-focused thing. This is empowering the patient. It's making me feel in control, and that is the main drive for it.
So you have a question?
Yeah. From a patient's perspective, I would imagine, I may be wrong in this, you would probably get an idea or knowledge of your condition, which would build up over time, and you would probably maybe inherently understand if your warfarin dosage is this, then the reading comes out at this, then you'll probably most likely have to drop it or rise or whatever.
Yeah.
How much of that do you think patients would accept the phone themselves just heuristically deciding that decision for you and only having to check up with the doctor every 6 months or 9 months or something to make sure?
I mean, me personally, I'd happily do that, and I can tell when I'm too high or when I'm too low.
Yeah.
But because I have to report to these kind of people, it's like, well, there's no point me even trying to self-dose myself if they're going to have to. They have to hear these things and take notes of these, and yeah. So I'm sure everyone will be happy with that. I mean, one of the reasons why I didn't want to put that kind of dosage thing in the app is because I didn't want to take that responsibility of, everyone's different. Their diets and it's so kind of warfarin is so sensitive to everything, so I didn't want to take that responsibility from anyone else.
How long does it take from having your blood done for the results to pop through into the anticoagulant system these days?
So it varies. So at the moment when I self-test, I can take a reading, I ring them up, and they get back to me like later that day with, here's your dosage. Last week when the doctor wouldn't prescribe me any testing strips, I had to go to the clinic, get a blood reading, and it was like 3-4 days later. It's like, right, here's your reading. And then I have to start that routine and go to the doctor to get a prescription. Blah blah.
Great job.
Awesome. So thanks again. Any other questions for anyone else who spoke? I've got one from Matt actually. Matt, who are we going to test it with?
Don't know. People.
Internal, external?
Everyone.
Okay, cool. Any other questions?
Are you alright, Dan?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Awesome. If not, thank you so much all for coming. I'm going to be handing out paper feedback sheets if you're more of a paper person. Fill it out, take a photo, send it to the email address, or the email will come through as well. All feedback is really helpful to making sessions better. Brilliant. Thanks so much everyone for coming. Thank you. And do take a cookie as well. I'm going to get diabetes. Feedback forms and cookies that come with a pair.
Oh, well,
User research.